3, 2, 1.
Open world races becoming far more popular as times move on. From the Horizon series, once exclusive to Xbox and now spreading its wings onto the Windows 10 platform. This party-style, mass event theme shared much in common with the MotorStorm series from Evo Studios, with a summer festival atmosphere wrapped up within wider but closed-looped tracks. This was expanded to the freedom of open areas in 2012's Forza Horizon original from Playground Games, now unsurprisingly one of the recent acquisitions into the Microsoft Studios portfolio. Interleaved with the Forza series each year, we have the latest 4th version to look forward to in a few months, complete with a 60 FPS mode on the X, which should really enhance the look and feel of the game on Microsoft's new premium console. When you think of an open world game though, one company stands shoulder to shoulder with the best in the business in Rockstar Games. Ubisoft long ago contracted open world-itis that is not so much crept as leapt into each and every major release from its collection of studios. Give the people what they want. Racing was the missing piece, but the hole was plugged in 2014, likely inspired by the success of aforementioned Horizon series with The Crew, a solid if not quite as exuberant first attempt on this freewheeling category. Practice makes perfect, so the Ivory Tower team are back for a second attempt in this sequel almost 4 years later, and we all know a sequel means bigger, better and more bombastic. Thanks to review copies supplied by Ubisoft directly, I can take a dive into the full game on both Xbox platforms and just how the team has pushed the Babel engine.
Okay, let's run.
Now, everything follows a similar path to Horizon. In fact, for a direct comparison, they share so much that at times you could confuse the light story elements and emphasis on social media follows man with each other. You pick a character, play a triathlon type event at the start, and then you're plonked into a binary version of America as you battle to become a racing star, albeit in a cut down fashion. Performing stunts in and out of competition, but winning races is the key. Each of these 4 styles, freestyle, pro racing, street racing, and the all-important off-road, you are guided by a random expert. These are introduced poorly, with some crudely animated cutscenes and cringy dialogue, but something you should be used to if you've ever played the Forza Horizon series.
Hero, my friend. I don't want your best. I want legendary badassdom.
A broad collection of manufacturers make it into the game, and you can race cars, buggies, bikes, boats and planes, earning new ones and parts to upgrade. You can then test ride any of the vehicles straight away, but they are time limited very heavily. Work hard to earn these for real and add to your stash. Controls are okay, but they do lean heavily towards the arcade scheme, and physics are integrated again with Havoc, allowing objects to be smashed through and suspension having to account for the terrain. This can add fun in races, as water barrels and other objects can be smashed through like a bowling ball, but this limited destruction can also be a fickle mistress, as some objects bring you to an abrupt halt, with thin trees offering the most confusion if one will actually sway or become an oak tree in disguise. It's still a welcome addition to the title and the engine, which is the very reason this video exists. It's entitled the Babel Engine, and it likely returns here and was used to power the first game. Ivory Tower were assisted by Ubisoft Reflections, yes, that very same team that have been bringing us games for decades. Shadow of the Beast, Destruction Derby, games I've covered in my retro articles before, and the Monster Driver series, starting life as a PS1 title and then growing through the generations onto the PS2 and the Xbox, offering Reflection the chance to craft an open-world, story-driven action title with clear aspirations or inspiration from classic movies like Steve McQueen's Bullet. The last outing on the PS3 and the Xbox 360 was the pinnacle of that tech. High detail, long draw distance and 60 FPS update with some tearing to help keep the action moving. The open scale allowing you to zoom into the heavens and back down again was all crafted for this game. And this, along with many other aspects of it, are what has been shifted over to The Crew. Now this is vital, as both games use large parts of that series' engine to power under the hood. In fact, it appears to use a few elements from other engines also, with the clue being in the name of it, in fact. Now the ability to zoom in and out of the world at will is always an impressive sight, and no less so than in the last gen Driver game. Obviously here we get a higher level of fidelity, resolution and scale, but the engine characteristics are unmistakable. One omission in my book though is the fast vehicle change the game now has is a welcome option, but they missed a chance to have the seamless zoom out and in again that even the old driver game achieved, and we saw in GTA 5. This would have made the feature even more slick. Clearly the engine and the RAM is capable of this, so I'm confused as to why this was not included. A cosmetic loss for sure though. Here on these consoles though, 60Hz is off the table and 30Hz is what we see across all formats from my tests here, and I would also say for the PlayStation platform, matching the original's target in fact. Now PC can go to 60Hz within the menu, but I do not have a PC copy myself, so I cannot comment any further on that version. At this level and being a racing game, it needs to keep that locked at all times, which it does by and large from my tests. You can have a couple of stutters when loading cutscenes or moving from map to map, but these do not really affect the gameplay and can be simply ignored. And there are a couple of sections on the Xbox One S where it can tear. It probably tears on the Xbox One X, but I haven't seen any moments where it does. Now I have shown some tests here to demonstrate the locked, or almost, nature of the title. It must be added that as a large open-ended title, I cannot test everything. So it may have some minor issues, but it, by and large, is close to its target enough to not really concern anyone, and I won't dwell too long on the performance. Now, although for races 60 FPS is always my preferred choice, the lack of precision needed here and the radial motion blur that tunnels the speed with per object post-processing also added on top of that, the game feels smooth and fast with the in-car view fish-eyeing the lens to enhance that speed further still. Now between the two versions, the sampling rate of this is much higher, see cleaner, on the X than the S, and this covers on all aspects of the title. The reason for this is simply the hike in resolution. The two targets are 1600 by 900p resolution, with the X adding 4 times that with a 3200 by 1800p output. Now both of these appear to be dynamic, as I've had counts as low as 1280 by 720 on the S and 2880 by 1620 on the X. But this is not the full story though. Within the game's post-process pipeline, many elements from alpha, motion blur, bloom, etc. are all factored into the temporal AA that is covering each and every pixel, give or take. Now this has clear signs that the temporal filtering we saw in Rainbow Six Siege and enhanced in Watch Dogs 2 is back again on these Xbox platforms. Now this affects the edges of geometry at times with uneven edges and partially filled pixels. This is carried over into the shading with obvious banding and stippled shading passes on textures and fine detail. In movement these break down further, but the accumulation of the AA quickly cleans this up and fills in most of these over a few frames, as the entire image is constructed with this post solution to accumulate previous frames data, and the mentioned edge issues leads me to believe this is using the EQAA hardware to reconstruct the image from a lower output buffer, likely around half the width and height as the final image, and the various counts we are seeing here actually point to breakdowns on this reconstruction rather than a genuine dynamic resolution, but these are just the information I can get from the screens and the captures here. The final results though are impressive from an image construction and performance level. With so much action on screen, the S model is pushing a great deal of geometry and effects. The temporal element does obviously soften the image, with the S looking good on a 1080p screen, but suffering far more on a 4K one, which is where the X comes in. The boost to resolution buffers enhances every single element of the image. Motion blur is cleaner and less banding, bloom is more precise, textures are sharper, screen space reflections are cleaner, and edges are sharper due to this higher base on the Xbox One X. The game can look incredible at times, and this is down to the physically based materials and lighting model, a full day and night cycle, and dynamic weather system. Make no mistake, playing through this game there are points that look very nice indeed. Now with another element coming from the driver series being carried over here again, the movie mode. You can cycle through these points and the weather system while making your own cool montage. Dry, rain, sun, snow and light all create a variety of moments in the game. The colour tone correction and contrast adaptation can be quickly noticed here, as the scene is transferred between the baked probe points and then blended between these points as you shift through the time of day. A must-have for any open world game, and the crew does not disappoint here at all. It has genuine moments of serenity and beauty within all the chaos. Now, the engine has taken other elements from Watch Dogs 2. The tessellated geometric water makes a welcome return for the boat racing, with some of the most striking moments in the game coming from these races. Alpha sprays from the back of the boats and the deformation of the waves attenuate across the surface. It looks great and affects the speed and handling whilst in the wake of it. It also gives a clean example of the abundant screen space reflections that are used across all surfaces, both horizontal and vertical. The standard telltale signs are present, of course, but the use adds both object, colour and light reflection, adding to the implemented global illumination bounce and making the cities, rivers and dirt tracks a little bit more authentic and convincing. Water has always been a difficult solution for games, as it requires multiple techniques and simulation to work. Soft body simulation, alpha elements, lighting from reflection and caustics, subsurface scattering and generally PBR elements overall. Ubisoft have a great record for water within games, with Black Flag still being one of the best in games. Racing across the lakes here, I had flashes back to one of the best water simulations in early games from Wave Race 64, but the GameCube version was simply incredible, with it also having the wake from other races affecting your handling. I would love to see jet skis added to the title so we can recreate some of those races and have a spiritual successor to a firm favourite of mine from the Nintendo Fold. Now, other 2D shader elements are also added to the water to give Fresnel specular and surface tension reactions, completing what is an excellent water simulation and look in the game. Vehicles themselves are pretty well constructed and display a great deal of triangles and depth, with the first person view offering a perfect chance to admire these rendered models' accuracy, from cars, planes or my favourite two-wheeled rides offering a convincing rendition of their real-world inspirations. Character models and world detail can fare differently though, as this is an open world game with a light touch story element. The up-close moments of dialogue highlight the weakness here and limited bone points and animation. Flat eyes, skin shading and clothing feels like a step back to other elements, but this is not the game for quality cinematics or motion captured action. The world itself is realistically modelled on the locations with clear sections that capture it well. The fact the entire map can be viewed at any point or height means that the streaming and scaling system must work well here to draw such vast detail and equally vast distance. Imposters, reduced LOD, shadow cascade and animations are all called within the frustum to keep CPU and GPU load balance within the world detail, and this pop-in is slightly better on the X than the S, but both of them have clear signs as you race through details drawing in. This is not a slight on the team or indeed the engine, as the game is drawing an incredible amount of geometry at times, with the speed and scale that this can be traversed, highlighting just how good the engine is at streaming data and overall memory management. It's very, very impressive. I cannot help but shake the feeling that this engine has a true GTA rival on the cards that is yet to be announced, but we will see. Rounding off the world simulation and backing up that dynamic weather system is the fact that you have full volumetric clouds in the game. 2D bitmaps wouldn't work when you can go from the ground right up into the heavens above, so the fact that they've rendered them all with a 3D volume does make them far more convincing, to the point where you don't notice just how good they are until somebody points them out. All that said, not everything is as faultless, with clear concessions on the simulation and CPU, with AI, animation loops, pathfinding all being obvious cutbacks, alongside collision detection as they simply clip through any obstruction or vehicle. Some of this is likely a design choice though. It must be stated that the game has no on-foot sections, and as such, these cutbacks make a great deal of sense, as you would unlikely notice them if you're racing around or even exploring the city. Another weakness is the shadow maps, as resolution and filtering can be low due to the sheer amount needed here, but while admiring a potential new ride, the aliasing and popping from these is a weaker section. The direction light reflectance from the sun can also have some small errors or obvious flaws at times, with large portions of occluded objects completely being ignored and allow the sun to shine through on the surface, but it's not all the time, but enough to be dropped into my nitpicking pot. Ubisoft have a vast collection of teams and history to draw upon when making any of their games, and here with The Crew 2 they have demonstrated how they, just like Sony Worldwide Studios, benefit from this shared skills, tools and tech across all their studios, pushing forward each new title with elements from previous ones while improving upon them. Driver, Watch Dogs, Rainbow Six, The Crew and possibly others have all contributed to the enhanced results we see here in their latest open-ended racer with scalable and multi-format engine that presents a playground to enjoy and takes advantage of the newest hardware on the market. Compared to the original, they've certainly seen an enhancement of the overall visual quality. Motion blur, for example, is vastly better here on the Crew than it is on the PC version here on the original Crew, with lots of heavy banding and very dithered look to it, which really affects the look of it. So they've spent the time well to improve the visual quality, the performance and the details in this game. But I do suspect that this will never hit 60 FPS on these consoles, because looking at the original Crew title, it is very heavily CPU bound at points, using the CPU very well. My FX 8350 here is heavily utilised on the Crew 1, so I do suspect that 60 FPS is held back, even with some of the cutbacks in the world here, due to the CPU, but it does use the GPU very well, and it ramps up the resolution on the Xbox One X to make sure that that GPU is not giving any kind of respite. The merging of the older tech and modern features is another example of how Ubisoft teams share and push the technology envelope. Some weaker elements and obvious sacrifices are not enough to diminish the overall package here, with a few glitches and bugs throughout. Sound did drop out sometimes, and loading can be exceptionally long for an open world title. Visually, artistically and technically, this is a sumptuous package on offer. They have really delivered an open world title that looks impressive across the board, with variations as you always get from PBR based titles. That real-time lighting system does really give you some epic moments, just like real life, and you're out, you just want to take in the view. I wish there was more to do in the world, but this isn't a GTA rival just yet. If you really want to enjoy the sumptuous visual quality this title has to offer, then jump in a plane, or even better still, on a boat. Then it really will have your jaw on the floor. Anyway, as always, if you guys and girls enjoyed this, then please hit the like below if you did, hit a thumbs down if you didn't, and share where appropriate, as that really helps me immensely. I am completely self-funded and independent, and any support you guys and girls can give on my Patreon site, and of course subscribing if you want to catch my latest content first. You can follow me over on Twitter and ask any questions as you wish, but for now, I've got to fly. I'll catch you on the next one.
New York City, this was the Live Extreme Series, Episode 1. Thank you for watching, and remember to follow us on all social media.